Conference will now be recorded.
Everything's good. Thank you. I want to say thank you. Okay. So before we get to the Parsha, there's a fascinating Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah, the tractate that deals with idolatry. And it really, there's a Tosafot, I'll explain who that is in a moment, that seems to address the situation going on today in the world with Iran. So I thought maybe we would go through that and then come to the Parsha. The Gemara in beginning of Tractate of Avodah Zarah tells the following forecast of Latid Lavo. In the time to come, God is going to bring a Sefer Torah, so to speak, hold it in his arms, so to speak, and say, whoever was Osekba, whoever dealt with this, whoever tended towards this, worked for this, come and receive your reward. And all the nations all gathered. And God says, don't come to me in a big crowd. First comes first. Okay? And the Gemara said, Rome went in first. Meaning the ministering angel, the spiritual entity that represents the Romans, went in first. Now, when we talk about Rome, right, we're not talking about the city of Rome now. We're talking about the Western world, basically, is what we call Rome. Right? Rome is Christianity, and that was the Western world. Why did Rome go in first? Because that was the most chashuv, the most distinguished of all the nations. Okay? And the Gemara then says, right, just one second. Hashem says to them, B'mai asaktem, what did you deal with? Let me hear how you contributed towards Torah. And they say, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe. Harbe shvakim taknina. We made lots of marketplaces. And we made lots of merchatzot, these beautiful bathhouses. And silver and gold we amassed. V'kulam lo asinu el b'shvil Yisroel. Anything and everything we did was only for the sake of Israel, that they should be osek in Torah, that they should be able to be involved and adhering to the Torah. Hashem says back to them, Shotim Sheba Olam, fools, world-class fools that you are. Whatever you've done for your own needs. You made marketplaces, Lohoshivahen Zonot, as a place for prostitutes to be. You had bathhouses, that was in order to indulge yourselves. And the gold and silver is mine, right? You've got no claim to Torah. Go out. Rome goes out, and in walks next Paras, Persia. Why? Because they are the next chashuv, the next of the important ones, distinguished. And what happens? Hashem says to them, in what way, b'mai asaktem, in what way were you osek in Torah? And they say, Master of the universe, we made bridges, we made cities, we waged wars, and all of that was only for the sake of Israel, that they should be osek in Torah, involved in Torah. Hashem says to them, whatever you've done for yourself. You made your bridges in order to collect your tolls, and cities, right, in order to make for your business. And wars, I'm the one who wages wars, as it says, and therefore they left the pachei nefesh. They left all dejected. The Gemara asks, once Persia saw that Rome wasn't very successful, why did they go in at all? Well, they thought Rome destroyed the temple. They helped with the building of the temple. Okay, that's the Gemara. A question that's often asked on the Gemara, when they said we did everything for the sake of Israel, God says, fools, liars. Why does he call them fools? They're not fools, they're liars. And the Brisker Rav explains that this is talking about, we're going a little piece of Gemara here, as it relates to what's going on in the world today. Okay, so the Brisker Rav explains that this is La'atid Lavo, in the time to come. At that point, they could look back and understand exactly why everything was done, how everything was orchestrated from above for the sake of Israel and the Torah. And therefore, they're saying we deserve reward for that because we now recognize that everything we did was there for Israel. And God says to them, oh, you're not lying. You're true. What you're saying is correct. But you're fools. Because you're not going to receive reward for that which I re-guided, right? In order, the same way that Paro won't receive reward for making the decree of every boy being thrown into the Nile, in order that Moshe would be brought in by the daughter of Paro and brought up in the palace, become a leader. That was not your intent. You don't get reward for that. That's why he says fools. Tosafot asks, how about Bavel, right? Bavel, the Babylonian Empire, right? Shouldn't that have come in after Rome? I mean, that was a more powerful than the Persian Empire. And he says a couple of interesting things. He says that Bavel had its time when it was compared to a lion, where it was very, very powerful. But now it's non-existent. But Persia, even now, is a continuing power. Tosfos writes this in the 12th century, let's say. And it will remain in its power until Samuch L'Biat HaMashiach, until the time close to the coming of the Messiah. Persia will remain at its strength. Tosa then says, furthermore, right? The Gemara asks, the Gemara then asks, and then it says all the other nations came in and got similar responses. The Gemara asks, well, why is it that we mention specifically Rome and Persia? And the Gemara says, because these two kingdoms will last in their power until the coming of the Messiah. Okay? And basically, what we have is a war that's going on between the West and Middle East, not necessarily all Middle East, but certainly a big segment, the axis of resistance that we call the axis of evil, but the axis of resistance. And then Tosa says that we say that in the future, Persia will fall into the hands of Rome. Hainu samuch lebiat HaMashiach. That will be close to the time of the coming of the Mashiach. Right? And that will be, that Rome will spread over Paras for 9 months, and then the Mashiach will come. So, the Rambam famously says, we have so many different prophecies about how it's going to look, how it's going to come about, how it's going to be. And he says, when it happens, and some of them seem to be contradictory to others, he said, when it happens, then we will understand exactly how each of these prophecies and what each of them was actually referring to. But I know on some of my WhatsApp groups, I know all of us are parts of too many WhatsApp groups in order to function like a normal human being. But there's been much talk about these Tosafot. Tosafot Tosafot means additions, and these are commentaries on the Talmud, which eventually became incorporated once the Talmud is printed. So you have the Talmud, you've got Rashi always on the inside column, and you have the Tosafot on the outside column. Rashi explains more on the spot. What does this mean? Tosafot contrasts our Gemara more to other Gemaras and explains how to resolve those seeming contradictions. And that's another way of understanding what's being said over here, because it needs to be contrasted outward. Rashi is more focused inward. Okay.
So, Rabbi?
Yes.
So this would mean if this current action is analogous to that so-called Rome, that we have 7 to 7.5 months more if we're really close to Moshiach, before Persia is.
Yeah. We hope a lot
so
less than
it's
that.
It's not going to be. If that's true, it's not going to be this quick thing that's being bandied right now.
Like the Rambam said, once it happens, we'll understand how all of these predictions and descriptions, right, all fits in, right? Our approach is meant to be, right, as the Rambam, or as is ascribed to the Rambam's 13th principle, Ani Mamin Be'emuna Shalema, I believe with complete faith, B'viat HaMashiach, with the coming of the Messiah, the Alpha Pisha Yitmameya, even though he might tarry, Achak Elo, I will await for him b'chol yom, every day, she yavo. And as we say in the Amidah, in the bracha of right before Shema Kolenu, ki lishuatcha kivinu kol hayom, is for your redemption that we wait, kol hayom, the entire day, every day. So maybe the 9 months started ticking by the 12-day war, as it's been called. Who knows?
Interesting thought. Thank you.
But it is fascinating how Rome and Persia will be, and basically it's fascinating. Rome and Persia is basically Esav and Yishmael. That's what we're talking about over here, right? We're talking about Esav, Yishmael, and Yaakov and Jacob, right? Esav, Western world; Yishmael, Middle Eastern world; and Jacob, that's us, right? So it really is pretty fascinating, all that is going on now. Hello, Linda. How are you? Good to see you. Okay, just 1 second.
Oh, there you are.
There we go. Now I can
There
hear
we go.
you. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Very good. Let us continue. Okay, so now let's go to our Parsha. Parshat Tzav is found on 5, 6, 8. Thank you. And whereas the book of Vayikra we mentioned last week is once Shemot ended with the Mishkan all set, all built, then, and Vayikra spoke about the different karbanot, the different sacrifices, and Tzav is dealing more with the role that Aaron, right, how they are processed, so to speak, the role that Aaron, the Kohanim, play. Okay, so we start off. Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, "Tzavet Aaron, command Aaron and his sons, saying, Zot Torah Olah. These are the instructions, the laws of the Olah, the ascent offering. Hi Olah al Mokdah al Mizbeach Kol Alayla Ad Boker. It's on the altar the entire night until the morning. The Eish HaMizbeach Chukad Bo, and the fire of the altar is burning upon it. Right, should remain a flame on it. V'lavash haKohen, and the Kohen will then put on his garments, ve'hirim et hadeshen asher tochal ha'esh, and he'll lift up the deshen, the ashes that were consumed by the fire when the fire consumed the olah on that ascent offering on the altar, and he'll place it etzel hamizbeach, and he'll place it alongside the mizbeach. So isn't that interesting? That the very first temple service of the day is the cleanup, is cleaning up the ashes. But it's not just cleaning up the ashes. Vehirim tadeshen, he must lift up. It's called truma tadeshen, the lifting up of the ashes, right? And it's placed alongside the Mizbeach. It's placed there in the courtyard alongside the altar. So what we have over here is we've got actually this avoda. The service is starting with, hello, Janet. The service is starting with the work that is done by the Kohen to pick up the ashes. And we think that maybe that's not the most exalted, right, uplifted aspect of the avoda, right? So why is it that this is the first of the divine service of the day in the temple? Why is it that we start with the ashes? Any ideas out there?
Yeah, it would seem like the Kohen would, after the evening tummy the night before, to start fresh and have it be, but at the very last, the last thing would be to command to clean up while it was still dark.
Yeah. So
But
I would say
on the other
clean it up, right? Clean it up while it's still at night, right? And then let's start the day with some nice fresh avoda, some nice fresh service over here.
Although, since the command is evening, morning, one day, maybe to show that it's part of the same day.
Well, actually, it's not. Meaning, even though Judaism has night and then day, our Shabbat begins with sunset Friday and then carries on. You know, sometimes you're talking to someone about Friday night and they say tomorrow. Well, tomorrow could mean Saturday, tomorrow could mean Sunday, right? Because it's already Shabbat. So whereas typically we always go night then day, the exception to that is in the temple.
Is in the tummy.
Is in the right? A sacrifice that's brought by day, you have that day and that night to eat it. Right? If you have one day, it's that day and that night. If you have 2 days, you've got that day, that night, the next day, and that night, but not the next morning. Right? And actually, there's an interesting understanding in that. And that is the reason that, or I shouldn't say the reason. I never like to say the reason. An understanding in why we go night and then day is because that is the movement that we always have, from dark to light, from confusion to clarity. Olam hazeh, this world, olam haba, the world to come. That is the constant movement that we have. But the exception is in the Beit HaMikdash. There, one has this absolute clarity right away, right? We don't go night today. No, we start off with that clarity right away. So again, why don't we have the cleanup at night, right? When that's actually the end of that previous day. And then let's start clean. Let's start fresh. Why is the first avoda of the day the trumat hadeshen, the removal of the ashes? So a couple of ideas that I've seen on this. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was the great Orthodox Jewish leader of the German Jews, and really, but his fame and his respect was throughout the entire Jewish world. He was fighting against the reform movement that began in his days and really took hold in Germany. Germany is where they were really, really began and really strong. So that was the battle. That was really the battle he was constantly fighting. And he explains that this is so significant, this is so important that we, just 1 second, that yes, he explains that it is, he explains that we have to recognize that we're not just taking a fresh start, but every day's avoda is built, the avoda meaning the divine service. Every day's avoda is built upon the avoda of the day before. And we can only move forward with new avoda when we recognize the kedusha, the holiness, the importance of the avoda of the day before. A famous story that I heard, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky was flying to Israel, from Israel, and he was already an older man, and one of the great Torah leaders of the 20th century in the United States, lived in Muncie. And his grandson was there on the flight, doting to his every need. And he was sitting next to a very distinguished Israeli politician, might have been a member of the Knesset, right? And this Knesset member remarked to the rabbi, it's amazing how your grandson has such respect and such reverence for you, right? He said, my family, I'm the old man, I'm old-fashioned, I'm outdated, I'm out of touch with all of today's issues. So Rav Yaakov said to him, right, it all depends what we teach our children. He said, if we teach our children that we're all descendants of apes, so then one looks at a grandfather and says, oh, 2 generations closer to right, to being an ape, right? If we teach our children that we stood at Mount Sinai, that we're the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, that we all come from Adam Arishon, so then we look at an earlier generation and recognize that is one step closer to Sinai, one step closer to the patriarchs and matriarchs. So Rav Hirsch explains that we have to start with the avoda of the day before. And that has holiness. And we don't just do custodial work. There's the Trumat Hadeshen. There's the lifting up of those ashes. And that is the start of the avoda. Once we've shown respect, deference to the previous day's avoda, now we can start. We only can build upon that. That's the only way to move forward.
It also says it has to be on the flame all night. So doesn't a Kohen have to remain through the night to make sure that it
A fire hazard?
And no, that it continues to burn, that the flame doesn't go out.
There probably were Kohanim who were there making sure, or I think just they knew how much wood needed to go on. There's a certain amount, and that would go through the night. I don't think it was tended to the whole night, because Masechet Tamid, there we have them coming in the morning, opening up the gates and beginning all of that, right? So that is
Is it
yeah.
ever discussed of what happens if it did happen to go out?
Not sure. Not that I can recall.
Since usually everything is discussed. Since usually everything is discussed.
It might be discussed somewhere, but I'm not up on it. Another idea that I heard, which will come to play again a little later on in the Parsha, is that the Kohanim are our spiritual proxies. They are the ones who were chosen to do all of the service in the Beit HaMikdash. And they eat from the karbanot brought, some of them that can be consumed, they get to eat it, right? And we say when they're eating, it's mishulchan gavoa ka'achli. They're eating from God's table. And therefore they are in a very, very high and exalted position. And therefore, they tell a story about some Hasidic Rebbe, I forgot who it was, who would dress in a very exalted manner because of what he represented, right? And he had these very, very nice, pelts that he would wear, right? And very, very nice boots. But in fact, the boots were open on the bottom. He was walking around barefoot, meaning that he needed to present a certain royalty, a certain elegance as the Sar of the Torah, as a leader of the Torah, but he himself recognized that he's just a simple person standing before God. We always say that the greatest, the most humble person that ever lived was Moshe, right? Now, that does not mean that Moshe didn't realize that he was the number one Jew of all time, right? He was the one who received the Torah. He was the one who had a prophecy beyond anyone else's prophecy ever. But nevertheless, he was not comparing himself to others. He was always standing before God. And perhaps because he had the close relationship with God, that's what gave him the greatest humility, because that's what who he was before. And therefore, the Kohanim, when they are doing, before they start their avodah, their exalted service, what's the first thing they need to do? Take out the garbage. The first thing they need to do is to clean up after themselves. And the more that one humbles oneself before God, the more exalted a person is. Famously, the case with King David, when he was bringing the Aron, right? And he's dancing before it, right? And Michal, the daughter of Shaul, right, looks out the window and she is disgusted to see her husband, the king, prancing around like a commoner. And she takes him to task over it. And he answers very sharply that before the God who chose me over your father's house, that's before whom I am dancing and celebrating, showing her that's exactly the difference between the house of Saul and the house of David. And that's why the house of David is eternal, and the house of Saul came to a very abrupt end. And therefore, he needs to have that humility as he's doing the avodah of cleaning up after himself and doing this more custodial work, and recognizing that any avodah that we do before Hashem is actually very, very uplifting. And that is the best that we can do. If we'll jump up ahead a little bit, and then we'll double back. We have on page 570, okay? So, by Sheni, verse 12, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Perek Vav, Pasuk Yud Bet Yigimel, Zeh Korban Aaron Uvanav. This is the sacrifice of Aaron and his sons. Asher yakrivu laHashem, that they'll bring before Hashem. Biyom himashach oto, on the day that he will be anointed. Asirit haifa, a tenth of an ephah, that's a measurement of solet, mincha, tamid, constantly. Machatzita baboker, umachatzita ba'arev. Half of it brought in the morning, half brought in the end. So it seems to be a little bit contradictory. We said on the day he is inaugurated, and then we said it is continual, which means that it's daily. So what is it? Is this an inauguration offering, or is this a daily offering? And Rashi, the Gemara, explains that it's both. For a regular Kohen, it's called a Kohen Hedyot. On the day that he is inaugurated to start doing his avoda, his service, he needs to bring this inauguration meal, flour offering. But the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, for him it is every single day he needs to bring that. So why would that be? Why is it that the Kohen Gadol needs to bring it every day? Or what lesson can we extract from that? Yeah, Jan.
So the first time, Nadav, Abihu, Isamar, and Elazar had to bring this meal offering, and then they didn't do it anymore, but Aaron did.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, an interesting idea on this is human nature is we get used to things very quickly and very easily, and then it becomes ho-hum. And there are many things that we have to make sure that we retain that appreciation and that sense of newness, that sense of freshness. There's actually a halacha that when people, or Pasuk speaks about this, the verse speaks about this. When we go to the temple, we go in through one door, entryway, and exit through a different way. Right? And it wasn't to send us through the temple gift shop on the way out to buy to increase the revenues over there. Right? We cannot go through and out the same door. Why? You go in out the same door, what happens? Ho hum. You get used to it. Right? It becomes just regular, just mundane. You know, when Natalie and I are meeting with a groom and bride before their wedding, and Natalie goes in depth with the wife. It's mostly on the wife. I do a little bit less with the husband, but about the idea of family purity and going to the mikvah, right? And one of the ideas that we share is people are always looking for something new, fresh, and exciting. So one of the many benefits of the family purity structure is it takes that newness, that freshness, that excitement, and puts it exactly where it should be, which is between husband and wife, and not anyone have a sense that in order to have that new, fresh excitement, let me go beyond. So the Kohen Gadol, he needs to realize that this exalted position that he has amongst that exalted group of Kohanim is not something to be taken for granted. And therefore, he needs to bring his initiation offering every day. Every day, he's meant to feel that same excitement, that same honor, that same privilege, privilege not in a negative sense, but that same gift that he's been granted to feel that on every single day. And therefore he brings that every day.
But wouldn't that routinize it, and then that offering, and make it, okay, I'm doing it again.
So yes, but what is he doing again? He's having an inauguration ceremony every day. You're right. Whatever he's doing is going to be every day. But we take this inauguration ceremony and say, right, be inaugurated. Have this inauguration ceremony every single day that you appreciate it. You know, we say it in our daily prayers, Mechadesh b'chol yom tamid maaseh bereshit, that Hashem renews every single day the act of bereshit, the act of creation. And our understanding of that is that if I am creating yesh meyesh, something, from an existing material, it'll stand on its own. But creation of the worlds was yesh me'ayin. It was something from nothing. Right? Science describes it. There was this incredible flash, and at that moment, all of matter, right, came into existence. Right? Yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. And in order for something from nothing to exist, it needs to have this constant input of this God energy going into it. And therefore, the fact that it exists this moment is no guarantee and no proof that it will continue to exist the next moment. And that is how our own, the Kohen Gadol, really each of us is meant to live, with this appreciation of this newfound gift every moment.
That's a very interesting concept. Perspective I had. Thank you.
Well,
But since Hashem saw Kitov several times, wouldn't someone be able to make the perspective or the approach that that Hashem made whatever the materials that flashed out stable, and that
they're stable as long as they are. You know, this light is very stable, right? As long as there is the electricity flowing into it, right? Take away the power source, right? It's only because there's a constant flow going into it. Yeah. Yes, though.
We got that concept when we say Hayom.
Yeah. Right. Also, right. Dov is pointing out in the Shema, we say Ashanoch Mitzvah Hayom, I'm commanding you today. And Rashi, others bring the teaching of the sages. We're supposed to try to feel each day it is like a diyuta chadasha. It's like a new mission that's being given to us. And actually, you know, this segues a little bit into Pesach, right? The mashal, the parable is given that a king was once traveling through the countryside, and he goes for a walk into the forest with his entourage. And as he's walking, he hears the most beautiful sound of a flute being played. And they draw closer and closer, and they see there's a simple shepherd sitting there with a simple frock that he wears, right, a little robe, and he's playing flute the most beautifully away. And the king is enthralled and starts to have a conversation with him and sees that this person is quite intelligent. And he says, why don't you come back with me to my palace? And you go through some training, and you can become one of the officers, maybe even one of the advisors in my kingdom. And this indigent shepherd says, sure, right? And he goes through different training over there, and he's absolutely brilliant. And he, over time, rises to the very, very top, to being one of the king's top advisors. And he's in charge of all the finances going on over there. And as often happens, the other people get jealous. The other advisors who are no longer the kingpins, they get jealous. So they start telling the king that he's really skimming off quite a bit of money from the treasury, and he's becoming quite wealthy on his own. He can't be trusted. And the king doesn't believe it, doesn't want to hear anything of it. But they keep persisting. And finally he says, okay, let's go search. We'll go to his house, we'll surprise him, we'll go and search. So one morning, not expecting him, there's a knock on the door. We're here to search the house. Sure. They search through the house, and he's living simply. He's living like anyone else, right? In a very modest fashion. Clearly, he's not skimming off any luxury for himself. There was one room, though, that was locked. And they said, let's go into that room. And he said, no, please, I'd rather you don't. And their suspicion goes up. They check the rest of the house, but they keep coming back to that room. And he's begging them, please don't, please don't. And the more he begs them not to, the more suspicious they become. Finally, the king says, have that door opened. And they open that door. And they walk in there expecting to see gold and silver and gems and diamonds and rubies and sapphires. And there's a little simple wooden bench with a simple flute and this worn robe. And that was all that was in the room. And the king said, what is this? And he said, I'm starting to feel a little bit proud, a little bit arrogant, a little bit powerful. I go back into this room, close the door, sit down on the simple bench, put on my old robe that I used to wear, pick up my flute, and I play. And I remember who I am and where I came from. And that is what Aaron needed to feel every day when he would have his inauguration ceremony every day, to recognize where he came from and the gift that was being given to him. And also Pesach. Pesach is a very experiential holiday. We'll discuss it tonight, Esty, right? But Pesach is very experiential. And the idea is that we go back to how it was. We remember where it was that we came from. And that way we can have an appreciation of who we are, or where we are today, where we're meant to be today, and what we are supposed to be doing. Because we have to have this constant appreciation, right? And then in the Parsha, again, a little bit further on, we have on page 574. Oh, just one second first. Go to 572. So we know that the Kodesh Kadashim, the Holy of Holy sacrifices, all have to be sacrificed on the north side of the courtyard, that half of the courtyard. Okay? And the Torah says that explicitly when it comes to the Olah, to the ascent offering. Now, when Olah is brought as a gift, I just want to bring an offering to God, right? There's also a chatas. A chatas is when I inadvertently did something that I'm not allowed to do, something of seriousness that had I done it deliberately, then the repercussion for that would have been kares, which is a spiritual cutting off. But that happened b'shogeg. I didn't know that I couldn't do it. I didn't realize whatever it was. So then a person brings a chatas, a sin offering, or a person brings an asham, a guilt offering for certain specific transgressions. So there it says on page 572, let's look at verse 18. Speak to Aaron and his son, saying, Zot Torah tachatat, this is the law of the sin offering. In the place where I told you to shecht, to slaughter the olah offering, that's where the chatat is brought before God. Why? It is holy of holies. And then go down to the bottom of that same page, chapter 7, verse 1. And these are the instructions of the asham, the guilt offering. In the place that you'll shecht the olah, that's where you'll shecht the asham. So it all is done on the north. So why didn't you just say do it on the north? Why this convoluted way saying in the place where you slaughter the olah, that's where you bring the chatas. The place that you shechted the olah, that's where you bring the asham. Cut to the chase. North, one word, simple. We know how judicious the Torah is with its words. One word, simple. Do it in the north. Why does it keep emphasizing the place that you did the olah? That's where you'll do the chatas and the asham.
Because maybe the olah is the one that is meant to go completely up to Hashem and connect us the Beth the most comprehensively.
So you want to say that we want to try to compare the Chatas and the Asham to the Ola to show you, just like the Ola is meant to connect you, so too the Chatas and Asham should also connect you?
Yes, like.
Okay.
Our run has to bring the inauguration offering every day.
Okay. So to
So
help.
if you're gonna atone, then, and if that's gonna wipe everything clean, then.
So
you
that
really have
brings
to
you
think-
into the Ola zone.
But maybe at that
Okay,
point,
that's a nice idea. Nice idea.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah. We never know for sure, Janet. I don't know for sure. No one knows for sure. That's why we always say the greatest Torah sage is called a Talmid Chacham. Talmid is a student of Chacham, of a wise student or a student of wisdom. Right? Where did I just see? Yeah. I had a Gemara I was learning a couple of days ago with the guys. And on the Gemara, there's Mesoret Hashas, who brings the source. Wherever the Gemara quotes a pasuk, the Gemara quotes another Mishnah, another Gemara. He just brings the source along, so you can cross-reference. So the Gemara quoted something, and he wrote Mekotzer Da'ati, because of the kotzer, the shortness of my mind, I wasn't able to find the source for this. Right? Not, I don't know where he's getting, right? Mikotzer dati, right? So we never know, we try. And an idea that I think I heard once, right, is that it's so important to let a person maintain their dignity, right? At our core, a person wants to feel they're doing something of meaning, and a person wants to be able to maintain their dignity. The Gemara says that, the Gemara says there are 6 blessings for someone who gives charity to help another person, and there's 11 blessings for someone who makes that poor person feel better. Right? To restore, to make sure that they can maintain their dignity.
That's very consistent with the thing of public humiliation being akin to murder.
Correct. That public humiliation is considered tantamount to murder, right? To the point, fascinating, that the poskim, those halachic deciders, discuss, right? So 1 second. So we will break Shabbos to save someone's life. So would we break Shabbos to avoid someone being humiliated? If embarrassment is like murder, right? So they say that no, we don't. But the very fact that they discuss it gives us a sense about how fundamentally important making sure other people maintain their dignity is. So an idea that I heard is that we want to have the chatas and the asham in the same place where the ola is brought. So therefore, it's not like I'm advertising, I need to bring a sin offering. I need to bring a guilt offering, right? No. He goes there, the same place where the ola is, right? And that way, again, it's teaching us to make sure we do things in a way that allow a person, certainly a person who is bringing this offering, right, to allow that person to maintain their dignity. Yes, though.
I think it has something to do with the animal.
Meaning?
Well, the animals picked to serve Hashem.
Okay.
And this particular place is where the animals serving Hashem on a pretty high level, but it's before
Okay.
the animals take
All
it to
right, but the question was, so why didn't you say, why does it say in the place of the ola? Why doesn't it just say do it in the north?
Still, the animal is a special location where it's going to end its
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
So maybe it has a lot to do with that.
Okay.
Because what do we know later on? There's holy sparks coming off from the animal.
Okay.
So I think it has something to do with it.
I could very well be.
Okay.
Okay, one last idea, page 574, is we talk about the Korban Toda, verses 11, 12. These are the laws of the fast peace offering. Asher im al Toda yakrivenu. If a person is bringing it as a thanksgiving offering. Okay, so a Korban Toda, a thanksgiving offering, Rashi says it's brought on Hoda'ah al Nes. It is giving thanks for a miracle that was done. What miracle? Yordei Hayam, he traveled overseas. Hoche Midbariot, he traveled across the desert or wilderness. Chavushe Beit Asurim, he was incarcerated in prison and now released. Or Chola Shnit Rapeh, or a Chola, a person who was sick, who's now been healed. And these are the times that we would make what's called Birkat Hagomel, a special blessing that we make, right? And that's when a person flies in an airplane, you don't say Hagomel, it's not considered dangerous. You fly overseas, all right, then you make Hagomel. So for these situations, what's interesting is Rashi says, Dvar Hoda'ah al Nes Shena'aseh, on a miracle that was done for him or her. Now, why are we calling this a miracle? Right?
Well,
People are sick, and usually people get better, right? People travel, right? If it would take a miracle for me to travel safely overseas, then I probably should not travel. If it would take what we call a miracle for me to travel overseas, then I probably should not be putting myself into that danger that I need a miracle, right? No, I want to land. I'm going to jump out of the plane. It'll take a miracle for me to land safely. Better just stay with your seatbelt on, right? And don't jump, right? So why is this referred to as a miracle, right?
And there's no other categories, because I can think of lots of things that at least nowadays. So is Gomel nowadays in lieu of this
Correct.
offering?
Correct. It's in lieu of this offering, right?
I can think of lots of other things that you didn't know, but that turned out to be high risk. And
Yeah.
so
These are the four
seemingly
categories.
Miraculously, so there's no other times you can do Gomel.
No, the actual blessing of Gomel, what we're not. You want to say your own little Hallel. Take those paragraphs of Tehillim that we call Hallel and say them. Beautiful.
Okay,
right?
so that would
Give
also
your
be a
thanks.
way to do that.
Give your thanks. Yeah, but it's interesting in the modim. Well, first of all, keep in mind Korban Toda. So the word Hoda'ah has two meanings. It is gratitude, and it also is admitting, right? And basically, those two are very, very intimately connected, because when I'm giving thanks, I am admitting that this is something that came to me from you, right? I'm not all powerful. I'm not self-sufficient. I'm not a self-made man, right? But recognize. And in the bracha of Modim, of the Thanksgiving, we say that. We admit and nodeh lecha, right? And we also thank you. And there we thank God, Val Nisecha, on your miracles and wonders, Shebechol Yom Imanu, that are with us every day. And therefore, we have to recognize the miraculous in the somewhat, or that which can often be misconstrued as being regular. Everything is fine, right? But to recognize that there are these miracles. And that's what Rashi refers to this. He got out of prison. Some people never get out, right? The Chabad have a whole holiday that they make on the day that one of the previous Chabad rabbis, when he was incarcerated by the Soviets, by the Soviet Union, right, for nothing wrong, he was released, right? That's a nace, right? And all the things that go on in our life, that we have to have this constant sense And this really goes back to how we began with the inauguration, to recognize that, really nothing is coming to us, right? Nothing is, oh, God's got to do this for me. I have to have this, I have to have that. And to just be overwhelmed with appreciation for all that we have, each and every day. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. The next 2 weeks, we're not going to be meeting. We have Erev Pesach and then Pesach. So we will pick up Be'ez Hashem after Pesach with our sweet group over here. I need to talk to you for a minute, though, if I can. Okay?
By the way, Carbon Toda is this Pesach offering, right?
Carbon
Toda, that's a Pesach.
Carbon Toda.
It's Pesach. It's a Pesach. It's a Toda.
It's a very different carbon, but certainly it's a means of expressing gratitude. Good seeing you, Linda. Be well.